I remember the sound first. That quiet hum of an automatic garage door closing behind me. A sound so ordinary, so harmless. Yet in that moment, it was the beginning of something I couldn't have imagined even in my darkest dreams. My old car, the one I've driven for years, rolled into the driveway of the home I had built with my own hands. The gravel crunched beneath the tires like bones snapping under pressure. And for a second, I thought I was just tired. That maybe I was imagining the sense of dread crawling up my back like a spider settling in. But then I saw it. That car. Black, long, polished, expensive looking in the way that screams control and arrogance. Parked perfectly on the right side of my driveway, as if it belonged there. As if the driveway, the house, the very land it sat on had always been his. And I froze. Because that wasn't just any car. It wasn't just familiar. It was seared into my memory like a brand on my skin. That exact make, model, and plate, not a similar one. The one. His. My stomach twisted so fast I nearly dropped the keys. I felt them in my hand, cold and useless now, like they belonged to someone else. I stepped out of the car, and for a moment, time felt like it stretched itself thin. Like I was watching myself from outside my body. The same cracked stepping stones leading to the porch, the same creaky wooden door I painted a dusty rose back in '94. My wind chime still swung in the breeze, gently ringing the tune my daughter used to hum when she was 7. Everything looked the same, but it wasn't. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. I walked toward the house like I was underwater. My legs moved, but my chest was tight, my breath shallow. The air around me suddenly felt heavier, as if Georgia humidity alone wasn't enough to choke me. I hadn't been here in days. My daughter, Grace, told me she needed a few days alone in the house. Something about clearing space and energy realignment. She was always into that new age kind of talk I never fully understood. I didn't argue. She was visiting from out of state, and I figured maybe this was her way of reconnecting. I gave her space. I trusted her. God help me. I trusted her. When I reached the front steps, I noticed the porch light was off, always on. I never turned it off, even in summer, especially in summer. But it was off. A small thing, yes, but it was the first confirmation that nothing about this visit was ordinary. I turned the knob, unlocked, pushed the door open, and then I heard her laugh, my daughter's laugh. That light, charming sound I used to hear when she watched cartoons in her pajamas or when I danced in the kitchen with her as a toddler. Only this time, it was paired with a voice I hadn't heard in over 3 decades. A voice I thought I'd buried 6 feet under every locked memory and every sleepless night. The cadence hadn't changed, smooth, deep, practiced, like a predator purring. "Grace!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The laughter stopped. Then footsteps, quick ones, from the kitchen. Grace appeared, beaming, her brown hair pulled back in that messy bun she always wore when she felt free. She looked happy, genuinely, devastatingly happy. "There you are," she said, as if I had just returned from the grocery store and not walked into a waking nightmare. "I have someone I want you to meet." Behind her, he stepped forward. Time did not blur his features. No. It sharpened them. His face older, yes, lined with years, but the same eyes, the same calculating stare. He had the audacity to smile, that same tight-lipped smile that used to follow the words, "Don't cry now, you'll ruin the moment." And my daughter. She looked between us, expectant, as if introducing a dear friend. As if this wasn't the man who had desecrated my innocence, shattered my girlhood, turned my body into a battlefield I was still learning to reclaim. "Mama?" she said sweetly. "This is Bill. He's kind of my new family." I couldn't breathe. Every part of me screamed to run, to scream, to collapse. But I couldn't even blink. The floor beneath my feet felt like it was moving. I stared at her, waiting, begging, for some sign that this was a cruel joke, a test, a mistake. But she just smiled, taking his hand in hers. "I know this is sudden," she continued, "but we've been seeing each other for a while now. I wanted to tell you sooner, but, well, I thought it'd be better in person. And there's more. I sold the house, Mom, to Bill." The words hit harder than any blow I'd ever received. Sold. The house. To him. I stumbled back a step, the wind knocked out of me. This house wasn't just walls and windows. It was my lifeline, my escape. The place I built after clawing my way out of trauma, after raising Grace alone, after working double shifts for 20 years just to own it. Brick by brick, it became my safe space, my proof that I had survived, and now it belonged to him. I looked at her again, hoping, praying for some flicker of understanding in her face, but she was still smiling, proud of herself, proud of him. "How could you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible, my mouth dry, my knees weak. She tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean? Do you know who this man is?" Grace frowned. "Of course I do. He told me everything, about your past, about how things ended." I shook my head violently, a scream rising in my throat, but unable to break free. "He said you had some sort of breakdown when you were young, that you—" "No," I said, louder this time. "No, Grace. He's not who you think he is. He's not some kind man with a past. He's the reason I still wake up screaming. He hurt me, Grace. He violated me." She blinked, stunned for a moment. Then something shifted in her expression. Disbelief, then coldness. "People change, Mom," she said quietly. "You need to stop living in the past." And just like that, I knew. I wasn't just betrayed. I had been erased. Erased from my own story, from my own truth, from the very house I built to protect myself from the world. And worse, it wasn't done by strangers. It was done by the person I carried in my body, raised with my hands, and loved with all that remained of my broken soul. Do you know what that kind of betrayal feels like? It isn't just a wound, it's a rupture, a cosmic shift, a shattering of everything you thought was unshakable. I wasn't losing a house, I was losing my daughter, my history, my safety, my voice. He stepped forward, calm, in control. "Martha," he said, as if he had the right to say my name. "It's been a long time." The sound of it made bile rise in my throat. I turned away. I needed to leave. I couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. My body was trembling and numb at the same time. I reached for the door, my vision blurred, the walls spinning around me. And yet, as I crossed the threshold, I knew deep inside, this wasn't over, not by a long shot. They took my house. They tried to rewrite my story. But I still had my truth. I still had my memories, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. If you're watching this, and you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, if someone's ever tried to erase your story, your pain, your survival, I want you to comment, "My voice matters." Say it out loud, write it below, because your story deserves to be heard, and so does mine. My name is Martha Elaine Cunningham. I was born in 1959 in a dusty one-road town in the middle of rural Georgia where nothing ever changed, and people liked it that way. I'm 66 years old now. I live, or lived, in the same house for more than 3 decades. A small, weathered place on a patch of land I paid for brick by brick, shift by shift, stitch by stitch. I spent most of my life sewing, hemming, mending, crafting things from scraps and memories. People in town say I have the hands of an angel, but angels don't cry themselves to sleep. Angels don't carry nightmares inside their ribcage. I'm not an angel. I'm just a woman who survived. Some people collect jewelry or stamps. I collect silences. Moments I never told anyone about. Looks I pretended not to notice. Bruises I called clumsy. Years of pain wrapped up in polite smiles and a steady routine that made people believe I was fine. Because if I kept busy, if I worked hard enough, gave enough, served enough, maybe I could erase what happened to me. Maybe I could sew something new over the wounds. I used to tell myself that survival was enough. That being here, breathing, walking, functioning, meant I'd won. But lately, especially after what Grace did, I'm not so sure anymore. I'm not the kind of woman who turns heads when she walks into a room. I don't wear bright lipstick or loud clothes. I wear soft colors, sturdy shoes, and carry peppermints in my purse. I keep my hair pulled back in a bun and my voice low. People trust me because I've always been the safe one, the quiet one, the one who listens. But I have a voice too. And for years, it's been buried under the sound of other people's comfort, other people's denial. That house, my house, was more than just a home. It was the one place I ever felt like I could exhale. I bought it when I was 32, after 2 decades of surviving and pretending and getting through each day without breaking. I remember the day I got the keys. The realtor handed them to me and said, "Congratulations, Martha. You're a homeowner." And I cried, right there in her office. Not because I was happy, but because I had made it. I had claimed a corner of this world where no man could enter unless I opened the door. Door, my rules, my peace. Inside, everything had meaning. The walls were covered in photos, mostly of Grace, her baby shoes framed above the mantel, her handprints in paint from kindergarten, drawings she gave me on Mother's Days when she still called me Mama with that sweet, high voice. I kept every one of them. I held onto those things like they were holy. In the kitchen, there was a drawer that only I opened. In it, I kept my journals. Dozens of them. I started writing when I was 15, when I realized that no one was ever going to ask me what I felt. Writing became the only place I told the truth, the only place I said his name, the only place I screamed. Every time I opened that drawer, I felt my pulse race. Because in those pages was the real me, the one no one ever saw, the terrified girl, the angry woman, the mother who sometimes wanted to run away, the survivor who didn't always feel strong. I knew that if anyone ever read them, they'd see a version of me that didn't fit the image they'd built in their minds. The strong black woman, the quiet church lady, the devoted mother. They'd see someone raw, cracked, unfinished. I didn't want to be anyone's inspiration. I just wanted to be real. But I didn't have that luxury. Grace was my reason for everything. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dream I buried. I raised her alone after her father left. He wasn't violent, just absent, cold. The kind of man who said, "That's your problem," a lot. When he walked out, Grace was 8. I told her he went to find himself, but the truth is, he'd been gone long before the door closed behind him. So it was just us, just me and my girl. And I loved her with a desperation that scared me. I loved her like she was my second chance at a childhood, like if I did everything right, I could protect her from what I went through. I watched her sleep at night and prayed over her silently. I worked extra hours to buy her the good shoes, the good books, the things I never had. I didn't want her to feel like she had to be small to be safe. I didn't want her to be afraid of the world like I was. But maybe I protected her too much. Maybe I never told her enough. Maybe she never understood why I locked the doors twice, or flinched at certain names, or why I never dated, never brought men around, never smiled too long at a stranger. She called it paranoia. I called it memory. She grew up strong, fierce, bold, and I was proud of that. But sometimes I could see the distance growing. She didn't understand my silences, my fears, my boundaries. She thought they were walls, and maybe they were. But they were the only thing that ever kept me standing. The older she got, the more she pulled away. She wanted noise, city lights, freedom. I didn't blame her. She had a right to want more. But in wanting more, she left parts of me behind. She stopped calling me Mama. She started calling me Martha sometimes, like I was just another woman. Still, I kept the light on every night. I kept her room just the way she left it. I ironed her favorite blanket every week, even when she hadn't visited in months. That was the kind of mother I was. And then she came back, smiling, sweet-talking, saying she missed me, saying she wanted to help me manage my affairs. She used words like streamlining and transferring titles and trust. She said it was for my peace of mind, said she wanted to make sure everything was in order in case something happened to me. And I believed her, because that's what mothers do. We believe, even when it hurts, even when there's a voice in the back of our head whispering that something's not right. I signed the papers. God help me, I signed them. I didn't read every word, I just trusted. I thought, she's my daughter. She wouldn't hurt me, but she did. She sold my home, gave it away like a used coat, sold it to a man whose name I hadn't said aloud in over 30 years. A man who had stolen my girlhood, my safety, my ability to look in a mirror without feeling shame. And now, he was back, not as a monster, not as a fugitive, but as her fiancé. What do you do when your past walks back into your life, wearing a new name, smiling through new teeth, calling your daughter sweetheart? What do you do when the person you protected with your life becomes the very weapon that breaks you? This isn't just a story of abuse. It's a story of betrayal, of silence, of erasure. And if you've ever felt like someone rewrote your life without your permission, if you've ever looked at someone you love and realized they never really saw you, I want you to comment below. I still remember who I am. Let those words be a lifeline. For you, for someone else reading, for every woman who's ever been called paranoid, dramatic, delusional, for every survivor who's been told to move on, to shut up, to forget. We remember, we survive, and we speak. After that night in the barn, something in me changed forever. I didn't die, not in the way people think of death, but the girl I had been was gone. The laughter, the small dreams, the soft parts of me, they all sank somewhere deep where even light couldn't reach. I learned how to move without being seen, how to breathe without making noise. I became a shadow in my own home. Bill kept coming week after week like it was a ritual. My father would shake his hand, pour him whiskey, and talk about crops, money, and men's business. Sometimes I'd hear them laugh together. Two men, one pretending to be a friend, the other pretending to be a father. I used to stand by the window, gripping the curtain so tightly that my fingers went numb, watching their silhouettes on the porch, wondering how both could exist in the same world without the earth splitting beneath them. And my mother, God, my mother, she never said another word about it, but she changed too. She stopped humming while she worked, stopped kissing me goodnight. It was as if my confession had carved a hole between us that neither of us could cross. She became harder, colder, quieter. I tried to believe she didn't know, that maybe she was blind to it all. But deep down, I think she knew exactly what was happening. And she chose not to see because seeing meant admitting she was powerless. And admitting that meant she'd crumble. The abuse didn't always look like violence. Sometimes it came dressed in softness. Bill would bring me candy, small gifts, say things like, "You're special, Martha, not like other girls." And for a long time, I believed him. Because when every adult around you is silent, when the world refuses to protect you, the lines between love and control, between care and corruption, start to blur. He'd stroke my hair and call it love. He'd press his lips against my forehead and call it affection. He'd whisper, "Don't you see how lucky you are?" I could have chosen anyone. I was 13 when I realized it wasn't just him. It was everyone around us, too. The neighbors, the church folk, the teachers. They all saw the way he looked at me, the way my body shrank whenever he entered a room, the way I flinched when someone mentioned his name. But no one ever asked. No one ever wanted to know. They'd rather believe I was strange, moody, disobedient. Easier to call a girl broken than to admit a man like him could exist in plain sight. By the time I turned 14, I started keeping track of his visits. Every Thursday, every damn Thursday, I'd write it down in a small notebook hidden under the floorboard. Thursday, he came again. Thursday, he stayed late. Thursday, I wished I could disappear. Sometimes I'd fantasize about walking into the river behind the property, letting the current carry me away. I'd imagine what silence would sound like if it wasn't full of fear. He got bolder, more reckless. He knew no one would stop him. My father thought of him as a business partner, someone with influence, a man who could help him get ahead. I overheard them once, talking in the kitchen. My father said, "She's growing up fast, ain't she?" And Bill laughed, a low, heavy sound that made my stomach twist. My mother was there, washing dishes, her hands trembling just enough for me to notice. But she didn't speak, not one word. And in that silence, I learned what betrayal really sounds like. He started using threats. When I tried to avoid him, when I'd lock myself in the pantry or pretend to be sick, he'd find ways to remind me that I belonged to his control. One night, he cornered me in the hallway, pressed me against the wall, and said, "If you tell anyone, I'll make your mama pay. You want that on your conscience, sweetheart?" I didn't, so I stayed quiet. Every act of silence felt like a blade I was turning inward. He wasn't content with stealing my body. He needed my mind, too. He started telling me stories about girls who were ruined because they couldn't keep their mouths shut, about what happens to girls who cry wolf, about how no one would ever believe me because I was just a child with an imagination. And after hearing it enough times, I started to believe it. I stopped trusting my own memories. I began to wonder if maybe he was right. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. Maybe it was all in my head, but the body never forgets. Every time he touched me, it remembered. Every time he whispered my name, it recoiled. Every smell, every sound, gasoline, leather, whiskey, cologne, it burned into me like fingerprints on my soul. Even now, decades later, I can still smell him sometimes in my nightmares. That thick, suffocating scent that clung to everything it touched. When the physical pain wasn't enough, he found new ways to hurt me. He'd leave little notes hidden in my school books. You looked pretty today. You belong to me. No one else will ever love you. I'd tear them up and flush them down the toilet, terrified my mother would find them. But sometimes I'd keep one, just to remind myself I wasn't crazy, that it was really happening, that the monster had a name. There were nights I'd wake up sweating, convinced I heard his voice outside my window. Sometimes I really did. Sometimes it was the wind. Either way, I couldn't tell anymore. I'd lie there, clutching the thin blanket to my chest, praying for morning to come, knowing that even when the sun rose, the nightmare didn't end. It just changed shape. One evening, I tried to run again. I packed what little I had and slipped out through the back door. My plan was simple: follow the dirt road until I found someone, anyone, who would listen. But not even a mile out, his truck's headlights found me. The sound of gravel spinning under his tires still echoes in my mind. He pulled up beside me, rolled down the window, and said, "You're making me angry, Martha." That was the first time he hit me. Not hard enough to break skin, just enough to remind me that he could. When he dropped me back home, my mother was waiting on the porch, her face pale, her hands twisting the hem of her apron. She didn't ask where I was going. She didn't ask why he was with me. She just said, "You're causing trouble, child." And then she went inside. From that night on, I stopped running. I stopped fighting. I became what he wanted me to be: quiet, obedient, empty. But inside, I was still alive, even if barely. That tiny spark, that stubborn little piece of me that refused to die, hid deep inside, waiting for a way out, waiting for something, anything, that would prove life could exist beyond him. If you've ever been trapped in a story you didn't choose, if you've ever felt like your pain was invisible because the world chose not to see it, I want you to comment, "I see you and I believe you." Because that's what we all needed, isn't it? To be seen, to be believed, to be told that what happened was not our fault. Keep that truth close to your heart. I don't know when the spark turned into a flame, only that one day I stopped believing I'd die in that house. It wasn't dramatic. There was no one moment of revelation, just a series of quiet awakenings, a glance in the mirror that lingered, a breath held longer than necessary, a whispered "not today" under my breath when I felt him near. Those small rebellions, so subtle no one else would have noticed, were the start of my survival. I was 15 when I first thought the words out loud. I have to get out. They terrified me, because to think them was to admit how bad it really was. To plan escape meant there was something to escape from, something evil, something unbearable, something that wouldn't change no matter how much I tried to pretend it might. I didn't know much about the world outside our farm. I'd only been to town a handful of times without supervision, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not another year, not another month, not another night. If I stayed, I'd become what they wanted: silent, broken, invisible. So I waited, and I watched. I studied the way the house moved, the way the floor creaked differently depending on the time of day. I learned which doors stuck and which ones opened without a sound. I memorized Bill's voice from every angle. I could tell what mood he was in just by the way his boots hit the porch. I became a master of silence, a strategist of survival. Every time he touched me, I'd close my eyes and imagine a door that only I could open. A door leading to a place where no one knew my name, where my body was my own, where no one could call me sweetheart and mean something filthy. I began to dream not of revenge, but of distance, of space, of breath. That's what trauma does. It makes you dream small, not of happiness, just of absence, just of the pain finally stopping. I started gathering things again. A second escape bag, not hidden this time in the chicken coop, but beneath the loose floorboard under my bed. A pair of old sneakers, canned food, a flashlight with weak batteries, a photograph of my grandmother. She died when I was a baby, but I like to believe she would have fought for me if she'd lived. And then something unexpected happened. There was a substitute teacher at school, Mrs. Dalton. She was nothing like the other women in town. She wore red lipstick, loud earrings, and smelled like vanilla. She called us sugar and darlin', and when she spoke, it felt like every word was wrapped in a hug. I didn't trust her at first. I didn't trust anyone. But she noticed me. She asked questions no one else did. "How are you, Martha?" Not just, "How are your grades?" but "you." She'd linger a second too long when she asked, like she was giving me time to answer truthfully. And one day, I almost did. I stayed behind after class. My palms were sweaty, heart pounding. She looked up from her desk and smiled. "You okay, baby?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My throat burned. The words were there. I could feel them, but they wouldn't move past my teeth. She didn't push. She just said, "You ever need to talk, I'm here. No judgment. No questions you don't want." That night, I cried until I thought my bones would break, because someone had finally seen me. Not just the silence, not just the bruises I wore on the inside. Me. I didn't tell her everything. Not then. But it was enough to know someone might care. Enough to feel the weight shift slightly. Enough to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't crazy. I started writing letters. Not to anyone I'd send them to, just to get the poison out. I'd write to my future self. "Dear Martha," I'd begin. "You made it out. You have your own apartment, and you don't jump when you hear footsteps. You buy your own groceries and sleep with the window open." I wrote page after page like that, crafting a world I didn't yet believe could exist, but I was starting to believe. The abuse didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Bill could sense the change in me. Abusers always do. He began calling me ungrateful, said I owed him, that everything he did was because he loved me. Those words hit harder than any slap ever could. They twisted love into something filthy, something terrifying. And I knew that if I didn't leave soon, I might never be able to tell the difference again. The final push came on a night I still don't like to remember, but I will, for you. Because if someone had told me this kind of story when I was young, maybe I would have known I wasn't alone. It was raining, hard, the kind of southern thunderstorm that shakes windows and makes the walls feel like they're breathing. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, trying to get a glass of water without waking anyone. I thought I was alone. I was wrong. He came in, drunk, not like his usual steady self, slurring, stumbling, but still dangerous, still calculating. He cornered me against the sink, breathing heavy, calling me things I don't want to repeat. His hands were rough, greedy. I pushed him, hard. For the first time, I pushed back. It didn't do much, but it shocked him, gave me 3 seconds to run. I ran out the back door and into the rain. No coat, no shoes, just fear and fire in my chest. I ran until my legs gave out. I collapsed in the mud, sobbing, clawing at the earth like it owed me something. And when I looked up at the sky, I screamed. Not a scream for help, not even for God. A scream for myself, for the girl who'd been silenced, for the woman I might become, for all the times I stayed quiet to keep the peace. I screamed until my voice broke, and that was the night I knew I wasn't staying. I went back inside, quietly, cleaned up, put on dry clothes, went to bed. But inside, I was already gone. The next morning, I skipped school. I walked 6 miles to the public library in town and sat there until it closed. I read everything I could find on emancipation, shelters, escape plans. I stole a pamphlet from the front desk. I didn't care. I felt no shame, just determination. I didn't know how or when, but I was going to leave. And I want you to know something. Even if you can't scream, even if you don't run tonight, even if you're still figuring it out, Your silence doesn't mean weakness. Your waiting doesn't mean failure. It just means you're surviving the only way you know how. If you've ever had to convince yourself that tomorrow is worth surviving, I want you to comment, "I'm still holding on." Whether you're whispering it or shouting it, say it, type it, share it. Let someone else read those words and feel a flicker of hope they thought was gone. Because this story doesn't end here, and neither do you. I didn't leave that night. Not because I was afraid, but because I was calculating now. Survival had taught me patience. It had taught me how to wait. The part of me that used to cry in silence, that used to shrink when he entered a room, had changed. I didn't want to just survive anymore. I wanted to escape on my terms. I wanted to take something with me, my dignity, my story, something to prove that I hadn't been erased. Every day after that storm, I moved with quiet purpose. I was still careful, still cautious, but I wasn't broken anymore. I started collecting pieces of myself again. I began journaling again, this time not just as a way to survive the pain, but to map out my future. I wrote things like, "One day I'll have my own nameplate on an apartment door," or "I'll wake up when I want, not when fear tells me to." I would write those promises like prayers, folding the pages and hiding them under the lining of my shoes. The more I planned, the more dangerous it became. Bill could feel the shift. He didn't know exactly what was happening, but he could sense that something in me had changed. Predators always know when they're losing control. That's when they become desperate. That's when they become cruel. He started showing up more often, sometimes unannounced, sometimes drunk. Once, he arrived in the middle of the school day, waiting outside by the bus stop. I felt his eyes on me before I even saw him. My stomach dropped. He smiled, just smiled. And that smile said everything I already knew. He believed he still owned me. But I was done being owned. I didn't tell anyone at school. I'd learned long ago that people only see what they want to see. But I did start staying after class more often. Mrs. Dalton noticed. She always did. One afternoon, she pulled me aside, said she had something for me. A book. It wasn't a school book. It was a novel. I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou. I didn't know then how deeply it would change me. I took it home, hid it between my mattress and the wall, and read it with a hunger I didn't know I had. Page after page, I saw myself in every sentence, every silence, every scream between the lines. For the first time, someone had put my pain into words. And if someone else had survived, maybe I could too. That book became my guide. It taught me that I wasn't just some broken thing. I was a girl with a voice that had been buried, stolen, silenced, but not destroyed. That realization was like oxygen in my lungs. I started practicing speaking again, not to people, just to myself. At night, under the covers, I'd whisper truths into the dark. "You're not dirty. You didn't ask for it. You are not his." And little by little, those words stitched me back together. One afternoon, Mrs. Dalton asked me if I wanted to come to a youth group she volunteered with at a nearby church. I hesitated. I didn't trust churches. I didn't trust anyone, really. But something in her voice felt safe. I said yes. That Saturday changed my life. It wasn't what I expected. There weren't long sermons or fake smiles, just a group of kids, some loud, some quiet, sitting in a circle, eating cookies, and talking about real things. Abuse, neglect, anger, loneliness. There was a counselor there, too. Her name was Denise. She was soft-spoken, but there was steel in her spine. When she looked at me, it felt like she saw right through the walls I'd built. She never pushed, just sat near me and talked about nothing. Music, food, the weather. But one day, as the group ended, she handed me a card. No words, just her name and number. "If you ever need a safe place," she said, "call me. No questions, no judgment." I kept that card like it was a lifeline, because it was. At home, things were unraveling. Bill was becoming impatient. My father had started drinking more. My mother was quieter than ever. The tension in the house was a storm that never passed. I knew it was only a matter of time before something happened. Something final. So I picked a day, my 16th birthday. No one in my house celebrated it anyway. But I decided that would be the day I took my life back. I made a copy of Denise's number and hid it in my sock. I packed my things, carefully, slowly, one item at a time, over the course of a week. I waited for a night when my father would be passed out, when my mother would be gone visiting her sister, when Bill wouldn't be around. That night came. I didn't cry when I left. I didn't even look back. I just walked. For hours. My feet blistered, my legs numb, but my heart beating with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. I found a payphone outside the gas station on Highway 22. My hands trembled as I dialed. Denise speaking. I couldn't talk. I just breathed. "Martha," she said softly. "Is that you?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see. "Are you safe?" I managed one word. "No." And just like that, things moved. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. Within 30 minutes, a small gray car pulled up. Denise stepped out, opened the door, and wrapped me in the first real hug I'd ever felt in my life. No pressure, no questions, just safety. I sobbed in her arms like a child. She brought me to a women's shelter run by survivors, women who knew, women with eyes like mine. I stayed there for weeks. I had counseling, support, hot meals, clean sheets, and silence. Real silence. Not the kind that hides fear, but the kind that soothes. The kind that lets you sleep. They helped me apply for emancipation. I got my GED. I started working part-time sewing again, this time with purpose. I began piecing together a life, a real life. And most importantly, for the first time in my life, I started saying his name. Not in fear, but in truth. I wrote it down, spoke it in therapy, released it from the cage it had lived in inside me. Because naming your trauma doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. If you've ever taken even the smallest step toward your healing, no matter how messy or slow, I want you to comment. This is my first step. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be strong every day. You just have to be honest. And here's the truth. Healing is not linear. But every small act of courage builds something that no abuser can ever take from you again. Your power. And mine was just beginning. Freedom wasn't a finish line. It was a hallway. And when I finally stepped into it, I didn't run. I stood still. For the first time in years, the chains weren't there. The air felt different. Not lighter exactly. Just mine. It was mine to breathe finally. But it didn't feel like celebration. It felt like silence. Not the terrifying silence of his footsteps behind me, but the kind that wraps around you after a storm. The kind where you still expect thunder, even though the sky has cleared. In those first few weeks after I left, I didn't know how to be a person. I woke up in the shelter's small cot, surrounded by women with stories behind their eyes and hands that trembled even when they smiled. I learned how to eat without watching the door, how to speak without asking permission, how to cry without shame. I didn't do any of it well at first. I still jumped at certain sounds. I still slept with my shoes on just in case I had to run. I still kept a knife under the pillow, not because I wanted to use it, but because I needed to feel I could. Trust for me wasn't something people earned. It was something I built brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Denise was the first brick. Then came April, a woman with a soft laugh and deep scars on her arms who told me that healing wasn't about forgetting. It was about surviving on your own terms. Then came the woman who ran the shelter kitchen, Miss Lorna, who taught me how to make biscuits from scratch and said things like, "Baby, you deserve tenderness," as if it were a fact, not a dream. For the first time, I was surrounded by survivors, not victims. Survivors. They didn't flinch when I told my story. They didn't ask why I didn't run sooner. They didn't look at me like I was broken. They just nodded, listened, and held space. I learned that healing isn't a clean line. It's a mess. It's a wound that reopens on Tuesdays and stitches itself back together on Fridays. It's one step forward and three back, but you keep moving anyway. I started writing again. Not just letters to my future self, but to the girl I used to be. "Dear Martha," I wrote, "you were never the problem." I wrote it again and again, because it's one thing to survive trauma. It's another to stop blaming yourself for it. Bill had conditioned me for years. He had made me believe that everything he did was because of something in me. My body, my silence, my maturity. He made me think I invited it, even when I said no with my tears, with my trembling, with my eyes begging someone to save me. But now I knew the truth. Predators don't pick girls because they're seductive. They pick them because they're vulnerable, because they know no one's watching, because they rely on silence. And that's why I started speaking. Denise helped me join a group that visited high schools, talking about abuse, consent, and survival. I was terrified the first time. My voice shook. My hands wouldn't stop sweating. But I stood in front of a group of girls, looked into their uncertain, curious eyes, and I told them the truth. Not the gory details, just enough to let them know you're not alone. And if someone is hurting you, it's not your fault. After that first talk, a girl stayed behind. She didn't say much, just walked up to me and whispered, "He tells me not to tell anyone." And then she cried, right there in the hallway. And I held her, just held her, because that's what someone should have done for me. From that moment on, I knew why I had survived. Not to bury it, but to use it. Every scar, every memory, every sleepless night. It wasn't wasted. It became a weapon in my hands, a light in someone else's tunnel. And with every story I shared, I took back a piece of what he tried to steal. But freedom still had a price. My family never called, not once. Not my father, not my mother, especially not my mother. I used to dream she'd show up at the shelter, that she'd say she was sorry, that she'd wrap me in her arms and say she'd believed me all along. But she didn't. And eventually, I had to accept that she chose him. She chose silence. She chose not to see me. And that choice burned deeper than any of Bill's abuse ever did. I grieved her like she was dead. Because in many ways, she was. I moved out of the shelter after 6 months, got a job at a diner, saved every penny. Denise helped me apply for transitional housing. It wasn't much, just a 1-bedroom with peeling wallpaper and a stubborn heater. But it was mine. The first night I slept there alone, I kept every light on. I locked and double-locked the door. I slept in the bathtub. It took months to sleep in a bed again. But I did. Little by little, I rebuilt. I got my GED. Enrolled in night classes at the community college. Studied social work. I wanted to help girls like me. Girls who'd been told their voices didn't matter. Girls who needed someone to say, "You're not crazy. I believe you." But trauma has a way of sneaking back in. Even when you're safe. Even when the door is locked. Even when the nightmares stop. I still carried shame. Not every day, but some days. Shame that I hadn't run sooner. Shame that I'd stayed silent for so long. Shame that my own mother couldn't love me enough to protect me. And those were the days I had to fight the hardest. Not against Bill, but against the voice he left behind. You see, abuse doesn't end when the abuser disappears. It echoes. It embeds itself in your routines, in your relationships, in the way you flinch when someone raises their voice or the way you freeze when someone touches your shoulder without asking. It shows up when you're trying to trust someone new, when you start to believe maybe love can be gentle, and then your brain screams, "But what if it isn't?" But I kept going, because every day I chose to live, I was undoing what he had done. Every breath I took that wasn't in fear, every step I took toward healing, was a rebellion. I became the woman he never thought I could be. And if you're watching this right now, if you're still in your hallway, not quite free but no longer trapped, hold on. Keep walking. Keep breathing. Keep choosing yourself. And if this part of the story spoke to something inside you, I want you to comment. I'm healing in my own time. Let the world know that survival is not a straight line. It's a journey, a fight, a quiet revolution. And you are a part of it. Grace was born on a Sunday morning, just as the sun broke through a storm that had raged all night. I remember it vividly because, for the first time in my life, pain meant something beautiful. Every contraction, every scream, felt like proof that something good could still come from me. After everything, I finally had something pure. I held her close to my chest, still slick with sweat and tears, and whispered, "You'll never be afraid like I was." She was so small, so perfect. Her eyes were dark and wide, and when she looked at me, it felt like the world stopped spinning. That tiny heartbeat against my skin was a promise I swore I would never break. I didn't have money. I didn't have family. But I had her, and I thought that would be enough. Those first few years, It was just me and Grace against the world. I worked as a cleaner during the day, sewed at night, and took whatever odd jobs I could find in between. We lived in a small apartment with peeling paint and a leaky roof, but it was ours. I hung her drawings on the fridge, made pancakes on Sundays, and told her bedtime stories about brave women who ran and survived. I didn't tell her they were stories about me, but trauma leaves fingerprints, even when you try to wash them away. I didn't realize how much of my fear I was passing down to her. Every time someone knocked on the door unexpectedly, my body would tense. Every time a man looked at her too long in the grocery store, my heart would pound until I could barely breathe. I tried to hide it, but children notice more than you think. As Grace grew, she began to see the cracks. She didn't understand why I triple-locked the doors every night, why I kept the curtains drawn even in daylight, why I'd freeze if someone raised their voice in public. She didn't know that I wasn't afraid of them. I was afraid of the memories they woke inside me. I thought I was protecting her. In reality, I was building a cage I didn't mean to. A cage made of rules, fears, and whispered warnings she didn't understand. Don't talk to strangers. Don't stay out after dark. Always tell me where you are. It wasn't just parenting. It was panic disguised as love. When she turned 13, she started to push back. "I'm not you, Mom," she'd say, rolling her eyes, slamming her door. "You can't live through me." The words cut deeper than she knew. Because she was right. I was living through her, trying to give her the freedom I never had while being terrified that freedom would destroy her. The older she got, the wider the distance grew. Grace was bold where I was cautious, loud where I was quiet. She loved attention, adventure, danger, all the things that made me tremble. I watched her chase the life I never had the courage to live, and part of me admired her for it. But another part of me, the broken, scared part, couldn't help but worry that the world would hurt her the way it hurt me. When she was 16, she started dating. I didn't handle it well. The first time she came home smelling like someone else's cologne, I lost it. Not because she'd done something wrong, but because my body remembered things before my mind could calm down. I yelled, she cried. Then she said something I'll never forget. "You act like love is something to be afraid of." I wanted to tell her that for me, it had been. That love in my world had always come with pain, silence, and control. But I didn't. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the counter, trying to find the words that would make her understand. None came. She stormed off, slamming her bedroom door so hard that one of her framed photos fell from the wall and shattered. That was the beginning of our quiet war. Years went by, and the walls between us thickened. She graduated, left for college, and stopped coming home for holidays. I'd call. She'd text back once or twice. "Busy, Mom. Everything's fine." But fine always meant distance. Fine meant she didn't want to talk. Fine meant she'd found a life that didn't need me in it. I told myself it was normal, that all mothers lose their daughters to the world eventually. But deep down, I knew ours was different. Ours wasn't just time and space. It was silence. The same kind of silence that had nearly destroyed me when I was young. And this time, I was the one creating it. I didn't want to admit that my trauma had become a wall between us. That in trying so hard to save her from my past, I had pushed her away from my present. I used to watch her life unfold through photos she'd post online. Vacations, parties, smiles. She looked happy, free, everything I wanted her to be. But every picture also felt like proof that she no longer needed the woman who raised her. When she called me years later out of nowhere, her voice sounded different, softer, hesitant. "Mom," she said, "I've been thinking about coming home. Maybe we can start over." I wanted to say yes before she even finished, but something in her tone made me pause. It wasn't just longing, it was guilt. She arrived 2 weeks later with a brightness that felt unfamiliar. She hugged me, really hugged me, for the first time in years. She said she wanted to help, to fix things. She mentioned finances, taxes, the house. I didn't understand it then. I just wanted her close. So when she asked me to sign some papers, I didn't hesitate. She smiled when I did, kissed my forehead, and said, "You won't regret this." For a while, it felt like I had my daughter back. We cooked together, talked about the past. Well, the parts she wanted to hear. But I noticed things. The phone calls she'd take in the other room, the glances at her watch, the way she avoided certain questions. Something was off, but I didn't want to lose her again. I told myself, don't ruin this, Martha. Just be grateful she's here. And then, just as suddenly as she'd come back, she started pulling away again. Her visits got shorter, her excuses sharper, and then, one afternoon, a letter came in the mail. Thick, official, cold. It was a notice of property transfer. My name was gone, replaced with hers. I felt the air leave my lungs. I called her, confused, shaking. Grace, what is this? Oh, that, she said casually. Don't worry, Mom. It's just paperwork. I'm helping manage things better. You'll thank me later. And I wanted to believe her. I did. Because believing her was easier than accepting the truth, that the little girl I had sworn to protect was now hiding something from me. I had no idea what was coming next. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply, only to feel that sting of betrayal, I want you to comment. I know that pain. Because sometimes betrayal doesn't come from enemies. It comes from the ones you love the most. And that kind of heartbreak is the hardest to survive. I walked through that hallway toward what used to be my sanctuary, with every nerve screaming that I shouldn't step over the threshold. My body remembered the weight of his boots on the floorboards. My mind recited the echoes of the times I prayed he would vanish. My heart, fragile, hopeful, scarred, beat like a drum I couldn't silence. And when I reached the threshold, the door creaked under a weight it had carried for years. The house looked the same on a surface level, the faded curtains, the worn wooden floors, the shadows in corners where dust slept. But nothing felt the same, because now stranger steps walked inside, and worse, the friendly face beside them. I saw Grace in the hallway first. She was standing where she used to wait for me to finish cooking dinner, the place where she'd hug me after a long day at school. But tonight, she looked older, hardened. The light in her eyes was distant. She wasn't my little girl any longer. When she turned and saw me, her face flickered. Surprise, conflict, something unreadable. She didn't speak. She just watched me, as though I'd walked out of a dream she could no longer reach. And then, he stepped from the living room. Bill, still older, still confident, still carrying the weight of all the years between us in every muscle of his body. His smile was polite, but not warm. His eyes rested on me with ownership, as though everything in that room belonged to him now. Martha, he said slowly, touching my name like it belonged to someone else. I didn't expect to see you so soon. I swallowed hard, tasting salt and disbelief. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to run. But this time I stood. I squared my shoulders. I took a breath. Grace looked between us. Mom, it's not what it looks like, she said in her soft, rehearsed tone. He stepped forward, arm raised as if to calm something unseen. We had plans. I'm glad you're home. Let's talk. Talk. That's what betrayers always demand. Talk, explain, defend. But they rarely listen. I felt the heat in my throat, all those years of silence pushing up. You sold the house, I said, my voice stronger than I thought it could be. You introduced him as my new father. You did this all behind my back. Grace's eyes flicked away. Bill watched me. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then Grace whispered, You signed the papers, Mom. You trusted me. My heart cracked. Yes, I signed, because I believed her, because she was my daughter, because I still saw that girl I protected with my life in her face, and I wanted so badly to believe she would never hurt me. He cleared his throat, stepping beside her. Everything will be fine. We just need time. You're safe now. Safe. That word tasted like ash in my mouth, because I knew I had never been safe while he lurked in the shadows. I knew I had never been safe when silence ruled our home, and I knew I would never feel safe as long as he roamed in my children's life, carrying my name without asking permission. I felt anger rising. Hot, raw, righteous anger. The kind that sets fire to false peace. The kind that demands truth. Safe? I said. You call me safe when the man who destroyed me is in my home. When the house I built is now his domain? Her eyes flicked to Bill. I saw hesitation there. Then she said, "This is what I wanted, Mom. He's been helping me. We talked. Don't lie to me," I said sharply. "Don't pretend you didn't know. Don't pretend you didn't do this." The air thrummed with tension. The walls seemed to lean in. I felt every moment of my life converge in that confrontation. The nights of fear, the silence in the dark, the promises I wrote in hidden notebooks, the journey I clawed through to reclaim my voice. Bill spoke calmly. "You're misunderstanding. I never meant to hurt you." He never does. That's how predators lie, with soft words and promises of redemption. But I'm older now. I know the grammar of betrayal. I stepped nearer. My heart pounded. "You took everything from me once. My body, my innocence, my voice. Do you think for a second I won't fight you for this too?" Grace moved to stand between us, her face contorted. "You're tearing the family apart." "Family?" I scoffed. "You call this a family? A crime disguised as love? A betrayal painted in kindness?" She looked away. Bill's expression hardened. The man who once whispered lies now stood with silence as his shield. I forced myself to breathe, not scream, not collapse, to salvage dignity in a room built on deception. "I came home unwillingly," I said quietly, voice cracking. "I came because I wanted you, because my heart still believed. But I'm not staying silent anymore. Not for him. Not for you." His throat twitched. Grace looked terrified. I felt power and fear collide inside me. They didn't answer. I walked past them into the living room. My footsteps echoed, filling the emptiness. The furniture, the photos, the dust, everything felt like a dream I didn't recognize. I stared at the old piano where I taught Grace to play when she was little, the winding staircase I scrubbed weekly, the windows I painted in summer. That house had held my hopes, my fears, my survival. And now it belonged to someone who introduced himself as my daughter's new parent. And I wondered, how much of myself was left here to reclaim? If you've ever had to face someone who betrayed your trust and stepped over your boundaries, if you've ever whispered a name they never asked permission to touch, I want you to comment. I am reclaiming my story. Speak that. Let it echo. You don't have to be quiet anymore. I stood in the middle of that room, like a ghost revisiting the place she died. Nothing in that house felt like mine anymore. Not the worn carpet I used to vacuum with Grace clinging to my legs, not the scent of lavender I used to spray before bedtime, not even the crooked frame above the fireplace with the photo of us taken years ago. A rare moment when we looked like a family. And now, standing there, I felt like a stranger in the very home I had bled to build. Grace stood by the kitchen doorway, arms crossed, eyes darting to Bill, then to me, then away again like she was afraid of seeing what she already knew. And he had the audacity to sit down in the chair where her father once read to her, legs crossed, relaxed, as if he hadn't shattered every fragile bone of my past. The silence between us throbbed. Then Grace said, almost to herself, "You never told me everything." I turned to her. My heart wanted to answer gently, but my soul was tired. "You never asked," I said. "I was a child," she snapped. "You were the adult." "You were my child," I said, my voice trembling. "I spent every day trying to keep the pain from reaching you. I didn't want you to carry what I carried." "You didn't want to be honest," she said, voice rising. "So instead, you wrapped everything in fear. You made me live inside your shadows. You made me feel like everything outside this house would devour me. And now I understand why. Because you were devoured. And instead of healing, you just passed down the silence." Her words were knives. Accurate. Sharp. I felt every cut. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight back. I just looked at her, really looked at her, and saw her not as the child I failed to protect, not as the woman who betrayed me, but as the product of a world I never escaped. A world that punishes truth and rewards silence. "He hurt me," I said finally. "Bill, when I was barely older than you were the first time you brought him home. He violated me in every way a man can violate a girl and still walk around like he's done nothing." She didn't move, not even a blink. "He was your father's friend," I continued. "He was the one who took care of the paperwork when your grandfather died. The man who smiled at every neighbor. The one they called a man of integrity. But behind those closed doors, behind every locked room, he stole pieces of me. For years, Grace's hands slowly dropped to her sides. "I tried to tell your grandmother," I whispered. She turned her back on me, said I was imagining it, that I was being dramatic, that I was lucky he was interested in me, that it meant I'd make a good wife someday. I waited for my daughter to say something, anything, but she just stared at me, breathing hard. He made me think it was my fault, that I'd asked for it, that my body, my existence, was something shameful. And even when I left, even when I built this life, I never stopped hearing him. Her eyes began to glisten, but no tears fell. "I never told you," I said softly, "because I wanted you to grow up free of that poison. I didn't want his name on your skin. I didn't want you to look at the world through the same cracked lens I did." Grace shook her head slowly. "And yet, here we are." "I didn't sell this house," I said. "You did. And now he's sitting on my furniture, using my kitchen, and trying to convince you that he's a different man." Her voice broke then. "He told me you were unstable, that your past made you paranoid, that you—" Her voice dropped, "made up stories." I let the silence hang for a second before I said, "Of course he did." "Why would he lie?" she asked, but it was barely a question. "Because it's what abusers do. They don't just destroy bodies, Grace. They destroy narratives. They rewrite history so they can live without guilt. They don't just steal innocence. They steal truth." Her shoulders dropped. Her hands trembled. I saw it, the flicker of doubt she'd buried beneath her belief that she could fix us all. "He promised to help me," she whispered. "And what did he ask for in return?" I asked. She didn't answer. She couldn't. I stepped closer. "Did he ever touch you?" Her head snapped up. "No." "Did he ever say something that made your stomach twist? Something you laughed off because it was easier than facing what it might mean?" She was silent again. "That feeling?" I said. "That discomfort? It's real. It's your gut screaming truths your heart doesn't want to believe." She backed away slowly, looked at him, still sitting silently, pretending to be composed, and then back at me. "I don't know what to believe," she said, almost childlike. "That's okay," I said. "Belief takes time. But don't let him fill the silence with lies. That's how they survive. In the cracks between what's said and what's hidden." He stood then, clearly uncomfortable with where this was going. "I think this has gone far enough." But Grace lifted her hand toward him. "Don't speak." He froze. "Just don't." Her voice cracked. I stood taller, my chest aching but proud. "You don't have to believe me today. You just have to listen." Grace walked past him and toward me. For a moment, I thought she might hug me, but instead she paused and whispered, "I didn't know." I nodded. "I know." She turned to him again, her jaw clenched, her fists too. And in that room, that sacred, stolen room, something finally broke. It wasn't me. It wasn't her. It was the silence. If you've ever had to choose between protecting someone and finally telling your truth, if you've ever broken a silence that nearly killed you, I want you to comment. My silence ends today. Your words matter. Your story matters. Let's break the silence. Together. After that night, I didn't sleep. Not really. I laid in bed at the small motel a few miles from the house that no longer belonged to me, the air conditioner rattling like broken teeth in the wall, and I just stared at the ceiling. The paint above me was cracked and curling, like a skin shedding itself after too much time in the sun. My body felt like that paint, tired, peeling, stripped bare under light I didn't ask for. Grace hadn't followed me out the door. She hadn't spoken a word after I told her the truth. She just stood there, staring at him, as if for the first time seeing the monster she had invited in. I walked out on feet that barely held my weight, heart thudding like a war drum. And with every step I took away from that house, it felt like pieces of me were being torn off and left behind. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to scream and spit and rage and say, "How could you?" But all I could feel was grief. The kind of grief that doesn't have a name. The kind that doesn't come from death, but from something worse. From betrayal, from silence, from being unseen by the one you gave everything for. I kept thinking of the moment I first held her in the hospital. Her tiny hand wrapped around my finger like it was her anchor to this world. I remembered the nights I stayed up sewing until my fingers bled just to buy her school supplies. The time she broke her arm in 5th grade and I cried harder than she did. All those memories rushed at me like waves, and I let them crash over and over until I felt numb. The next morning I checked my account balance, $23.17. That was all I had. The house was gone. The sewing machine was still in the closet of that house. Everything I had owned, everything I had built, given away with a signature I didn't understand. I thought about calling Denise, but shame wrapped around my throat like it always did. How do you say, I warned my daughter about monsters, and she invited one to dinner? How do you admit you failed again, even after surviving so much? Instead, I walked to the nearest diner, sat in the corner, and drank water with lemon because I couldn't afford a coffee. I watched the waitress move around like she was dancing with grief, smiling too wide, moving too fast, the kind of energy that said she was trying to outrun something. I recognized it. She refilled my water without asking and said, "Rough night?" I nodded. She didn't ask for details. Maybe she saw it in my face. Maybe she didn't need to. That day, I went to the library and sat at the public computer for 2 hours, looking up women's shelters in a new city. I couldn't go back to the one I had been at before. That chapter was closed. I couldn't be the woman who healed anymore. I was the woman who had been cracked wide open again. And still, I wasn't ready to quit. There was something strange about this part of survival. You'd think after everything I'd lost, I'd feel broken. But I didn't. Not exactly. What I felt was raw, honest. I had told the truth. I had named the monster. I had stood in the fire and let it burn. That was something. I found a shelter a few towns over and caught a bus with my last $20. When I arrived, they welcomed me with tea and gentle questions. I didn't tell them everything. I didn't have to. They saw the story in my eyes. They gave me a cot, a blanket, and space. Sometimes space is the kindest gift you can receive. 2 days later, I got a message from Grace. Just one sentence. I didn't know. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a long time. My hands trembled. I wanted to respond. But what could I say? I forgive you? I wasn't ready. I hate you? I didn't. I just ached. I wanted her to understand that sorry doesn't rewind the damage. That forgiveness, like healing, is a process, not a transaction. I didn't reply. That night, I sat by the shelter window and watched the streetlights flicker. And I thought of all the other women out there like me, who survived the first war only to be wounded again by the people they loved, who thought that telling the truth would be the end of the nightmare, only to find themselves haunted by new ghosts, legal battles, emotional distance, empty bank accounts, and yet, we keep going. That's what they don't tell you about survival. It's not glamorous. It's not a final victory song. It's groceries on a budget and applying for jobs with no references. It's filling out forms for food stamps and learning how to say no to help when your pride still stings. It's not heroic. It's human. But in that humanity, there's something sacred, a kind of quiet dignity in rebuilding after devastation. Every small win becomes a cathedral, a new toothbrush, a bus card, a smile from a stranger that doesn't feel threatening. These are the bricks of the new life we build. I signed up to volunteer at the shelter. They didn't ask for much, just help organizing the clothing closet and reading stories to the children when their mothers needed rest. And that's where I met Arya, a 6-year-old with wild curls and eyes too old for her face. She didn't speak much, but she'd sit next to me, close, like proximity was her love language. One afternoon, while folding donated blankets, she looked up at me and whispered, "My mommy cries at night." I nodded, not because I knew her story, but because I knew the sound of stifled weeping through thin walls. "I pretend I'm asleep," she said, "but I hear her." And then she reached into her tiny backpack and handed me a crumpled piece of paper with a drawing. It was of 2 stick figures holding hands under a crooked rainbow. One had curly hair like hers. The other had gray lines across the face. Wrinkles, I guessed. "That's you," she said. I almost cried, because sometimes kindness comes from the smallest souls. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. I didn't need to fix everything to be valuable. I didn't need to have it all figured out to be helpful. I just had to keep showing up, keep surviving, keep telling the truth. So here I am, telling mine, to you. Because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe you're the woman sitting in the diner drinking water because it's all you can afford. Maybe you're the daughter trying to make sense of a parent's silence. Maybe you're the child drawing rainbows while your mother cries at night. And maybe, just maybe, this story can be the thing that reminds you, you are not alone. If this part of my story made you feel seen, I want you to comment, I see myself in this. Because visibility is power, and your voice deserves to be heard. Months passed. The air began to shift. Slowly, quietly, the weight on my chest started to lift. Not all at once. Grief never leaves you in a single breath. It goes in waves. Some days I could smile, others I couldn't get out of bed, but I kept moving. And with every step forward, I stopped defining myself by what had been taken from me. I never went back to that house. I never asked Grace what she chose to do with it, or with him. I didn't need to. That chapter, though carved deep into me, no longer defined my story. Instead, I started writing new pages. I found a small apartment not far from the shelter, a place with mismatched tiles and creaky stairs, but with light, so much light. I kept the windows open. I lit candles that smelled like citrus and vanilla. I played music in the mornings. It felt like reclaiming breath after years of holding it. Grace called again, and this time I answered. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She didn't offer excuses. She just said, "I've started therapy, Mom. I'm trying to understand everything now." I told her I was proud, and I meant it. Because healing isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing truth again and again, even when it's messy, even when it hurts, even when your voice shakes. She said she was sorry, that she missed me, that she'd visit soon, and maybe she will. Maybe we'll make tea, maybe we'll cry, maybe we'll start over, not as mother and daughter defined by pain, but as two women learning to love each other, scars and all. I think that's the thing about survival no one tells you. It doesn't end with escape. It ends when you find peace. When you look in the mirror and no longer see damage, but strength. When you open your windows and realize the world isn't just full of monsters, it's also full of sun. I still wear the wounds. I still remember his voice, his lies, the years of silence. But I no longer carry them like chains. Now, they're reminders that I lived, that I endured, that I rose. And if you're still in the middle of your story, if you're somewhere between the silence and the scream, I want you to know this. You are not broken. You are breaking free. So please, before you go, do something brave for yourself. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I want you to comment, "I'm proud of the woman I'm becoming." Write it. Say it out loud. Feel it in your chest. Because healing begins with believing. And even if no one else has told you today, I'm proud of you. Don't forget to like this video if it touched your heart. It helps our stories reach more people who need them. And if you're not part of this community yet, subscribe to the channel. Here, we don't just tell stories. We honor pain. We share survival. We create space for voices that were once silenced. You're not alone anymore. And before you leave, don't miss the next story that's on your screen right now. It might be exactly what your heart needs today. Thank you, from the bottom of mine. Until the next one.